But first, the CBS News team is hard at work today combing through more than 10,000 materials released from the Epstein files just hours ago. The latest materials offer new details into convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's associates, including President Trump. Let's get right to CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane. Scott, what are we learning from these files?
Yeah, there are several thousand in this latest release, on top of the tens of thousands that were released Saturday, on top of the thousands that were released Friday. So these are starting to add up. What distinguishes this latest batch, Mugo, is that Trump's name comes up an awful lot in what's there and has newly been released, including references from the Epstein flight log indicating that Trump took those flights or was aboard those flights at least 8 times. What's more, there are items in the files, records from the Department of Justice, which indicate there was a subpoena issued to Mar-a-Lago, Trump's Florida resort, as a component of the investigation into Epstein's cohort, Ghislaine Maxwell. There are the references to those flights, and you see the years there between 1993 and 1996. There's also an FBI tip that was pursued, the merits of which are unknown, that somebody, a woman of some sort, of some age, was invited to Mar-a-Lago for an event that was characterized by somebody as an event with prostitutes at it. These are somewhat scattered based on what we've seen so far, not exactly chronological or well ordered, but I'll say this, there's no indication in any of these records of any wrongdoing or any criminal activity by anybody named outside of Epstein and Maxwell. And the Department of Justice, which has been the steward of these records and has been doing these releases, issued a statement this morning that said that the references to Trump in the records released overnight are sensationalized and unfounded accusations that did not warrant anything more, and that if they were, in fact, meritorious claims, the Department of Justice said they would have been, quote, weaponized in previous years. So you see a unique thing in America, the Department of Justice defending the president against allegations that is typically a distance from the independence the Department of Justice has from the president.
And Scott, the question here is what could come next in all of this? Obviously, we're talking about thousands of files the president saying mentioned multiple times, but it does seem like the Trump administration, at least the Justice Department, is saying, hey, this is not a big deal at all. But on the other hand, there are lots of people who wanted to see these files released, right?
It is the law that they all be released. There was an almost unanimous vote in Congress for the full Epstein file released by the Department of Justice by December 19th. Obviously, we're beyond December 19th. It's been a few days since that deadline. And the release of these files is ongoing and will continue over the coming weeks. And there's a projection of hundreds of thousands more files and pages to be released in the coming weeks. No date certain, and certainly no surety as to what type of content is going to be in the next batch. But read into that what you will. The Department of Justice says it's being judicious and slower with this because they want to protect the identities of any victims or information that must stay secret. Critics of this slow, piecemeal rollout of files argue it violates the law, which required the full release by December 19th, that the Department of Justice could have done the prep work before the 19th. And what's more, Mugo, the survivors with whom we're speaking say they're being caught flat-footed here. They don't know what's coming next or when it's coming, and some of these records may individually impact them.
Yeah, so important to not forget the survivors in all this. Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much for your time today. And CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman joins me now from West Palm Beach, close to where President Trump is staying at Mar-a-Lago. Willie James, thank you for your time. What have we heard from the president on the Epstein case and the release of these files?
Hey there, Mugo. Well, we heard from the president yesterday, but we aren't hearing much from the White House in terms of this latest batch of files that were released overnight. The White House simply referring us to that DOJ statement that Scott referred to. But during this announcement about new battleships, Trump-class battleships, I'll note, the president did talk about the Epstein files and their release, and he appeared to somewhat brush it off as a distraction to the news of the day that he was announcing. Take a listen to what the president said.
Today we're building the biggest ships in the world, most powerful ships in the world, and they're asking me questions about Jeffrey Epstein. I thought that was finished. I believe they gave over 100,000 pages of documents, and there is tremendous backlash. It's an interesting question because a lot of people are very angry that pictures are being released of other people that really had nothing to do with Epstein, but they're in a picture with him because he was at a party. and you ruin the reputation of somebody. So a lot of people are very angry that this continues.
Remember, several high-profile individuals, including the president, were connected to Jeffrey Epstein, and the president mentioned that he had kicked Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club. He also seemed to feel somewhat for Bill Clinton. He said that he liked the former president, but he also mentioned Bill Clinton, how he was in those photos, and he said, I'm quoting him here, he said, I think Bill Clinton's a big boy, he can handle it, but you probably have pictures being exposed of other people that innocently met Jeffrey Epstein years ago, referring to those images that we've seen from the former Democratic president, several of them being pictured with Jeffrey Epstein. Now remember, when all of this was coming about several weeks ago, when Democrats and Republicans were calling for these files to be released, the president was calling for an investigation into Democrats connected to Jeffrey Epstein, including former President Bill Clinton. So the president appears to be trying to have it both ways here, both somewhat siding with Bill Clinton, feeling sorry for him in terms of him being in those photos, but at the same time calling for an investigation into Democrats, including the former president there.
Yeah, interesting response. Willie James Inman, thank you so much for joining us.